Welcome to Attenuation, a weekly podcast where two friends come together to drink beer, discuss beer styles and trends, and just generally ruminate on the meaning of life, aka beer. If you enjoy your time with us, we invite you to become a weekly listener and subscribe to the podcast. Without further ado, here is this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome to episode 71 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
Hello.
Good evening, sir.
How are we doing tonight?
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. It's going to be a fun episode.
I get to drink two things I'm very excited about.
And we have a new segment.
We have a new segment. So
buckle your seatbelts.
It's not been cleared in pre-production, so I have no idea what's going to happen. But our main topic of the evening is going to be a good one. We're doing a deep dive into a light lager.
This is very exciting. Actually, I'm kind of surprised it's taken us 71 episodes to do a deep dive on this style, because really it is the most dominant style in the whole world. But we're going to try. We
got around to it.
Yeah.
All right, but before we get into that, we have to do our favorite segment, and one of the things I'm most excited about, and that's drinking beer.
Let's do it.
So the way this works is I introduce my beer, give some nose notes. Steven does the same. Then we cheers, drink, and give tasting notes. So today, I have yet another care package from Steven. It was not delivered by him, but it was delivered by a member of his family. So thank you so much. Mm-hmm. This is from Jester King, and it is called Montmorency. Am I going to mispronounce this? It's a Montmorency, which is a type of cherry, and then versus Balaton, which is another type of cherry, and those are from Michigan. So this is a wild ale, and they use both of those types of cherries to basically mature, sour, and barrel age the beer on. And Steven knows, one, I'm a huge fan of Jester King, and two, cherry is my absolute favorite flavor. I think of all time, of everything, not just beer.
Just of anything. Candy?
Yeah, cherry candy, yep.
What else is there?
Like cherry Coke.
Oh, cherry Coke. Oh, yeah. Ooh, I like cherry Coke.
Cherry pie.
That's right, there are a lot of things. Sorry, the only thing I could think of was cherry candy. Dang, man, you schooled me.
So,
couldn't
all right,
think of anything else.
I am excited.
Do you I have cherry on top, like of a sundae? You like the maraschino cherry? Well, I don't know. It's kind of a different flavor.
Well, okay. So, do you already want to go on a tangent?
Yeah, let's do it.
So
I live for that. They're
called maraschino cherries, but generally the ones you get like on a sundae, those little red like artificial candy ones, those are not technically maraschino cherries. The real maraschino cherries, and I could be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is right. First of all, they're like $30 for like a little jar.
Okay.
Because they're like aged and like they're like really dark, almost black red. Those are unbelievable. But I like both. I like the little candy like sundae cherries too. So to answer your question,
you're telling me my whole life is a lie.
Yes. You probably never had
had a real maraschino cherry.
Unless you specifically gone and bought them, and they're outrageously expensive. You can get them at like Total Wine and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually look for them now.
Okay.
A real maraschino cherry.
So yeah. Anyways, cherries are good. So let's get to this. So it's this is fancy beer, but it doesn't have a cork or wax.
It doesn't have a cork. Are you sure?
Oh, is there going to be a cork in here?
Maybe.
I'm not prepared for a cork.
I think there might be.
There's no cork.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't ready for a cork.
Can I tell the audience what you're celebrating this week?
Yeah, you can tell them.
It's Jason's birthday in a couple days.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have already passed when you listen to this episode.
Yeah, I'll already be old.
Can I tell them how old you're turning?
You may.
Big 4-0 this year.
Over the hill.
40. Well, you're like at the top of the hill.
I thought 40's over the hill.
Well, I mean, that's what they say, but it seems like it's only one day you've turned 40. Right? So now you're at the top of the hill. It's just downhill from here.
Ah, okay.
Right? Is that what they mean by that? Or does that mean like, okay, now you're done. You're rolling. You're already rolling down the hill.
I think they just mean everything gets worse now. Like, you peaked and now it's almost down.
Yeah. All right. Well, at least you're peaking drinking Jester King's cherry beer.
Yeah, a couple days before my life is starting to go into the trash can.
Sounds like a good way to peak to me. So
I get to drink Jester King.
Ooh, okay, this like that color. It's a lot more pink than I thought.
Yeah, it is like it's actually. So I have something else I'm gonna drink. It's the same color. We'll get to that. We'll get to that soon. But it pours like this is like red Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
that's the color.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be darker than that.
Oh, it smells amazing. So obviously it smells like cherries, but it has a little bit of that sour, like lactose sour, a little bit of like vanilla, maybe even like has a little bit of like a smell of almost like wine as well. Okay, I'm very excited. Okay, introduce your beer. Go fast.
I'm jealous. Okay.
I'm just kidding. Take your time.
My beer introductions are always like 10 minutes long, so he's like, dude, I just want to drink my beer. Okay, this beer is called Side Pole. It is from Fair State Brewing Cooperative in Minnesota. It is a collaboration with a brewery called Bierstadt Lager. They do all lagers. And this beer is a Czech style pale lager. And it says crisp, malty, soft, and crushable. 4.1% ABV. I even got one that just says pale lager on it. I made a very, very fun run to the beer shop today.
Did you?
Yes, and I spent a lot of money.
That wasn't the only beer you bought?
No. So, well, I have my new segment coming up that I can use to explain something. Okay.
I'm excited.
Okay, this is beer. This is the color of beer. Okay, this is your golden beer with a nice big foamy head. Perfectly clear. You can see the label on the glass through the glass. It's just nice, like effervescent bubbles coming up through the whole thing continuously, probably for the whole time I'm drinking the beer. It's just beautiful beer. That beautiful straw-colored beer that they would use in any stock photo if you just searched a beer.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. And it has like the perfect little head on top.
Oh, it smells really good. It smells like crisp sort of honey, a little bit of like, it's very lemony, very grassy. This is super aromatic. It has a nice, like, just a tiny bit of like almost hop aroma. Just a really, really light vegetal hop aroma with like a lemony, honey, and kind of like biscuity malt smell to it. So that's it.
It smells nice.
I know, it's actually a really nice nose on it coming off of this. So
all right, cheers.
Cheers.
To almost being over the hill.
All right, drink your beer, old man.
Oh yes. This is really, really good. Oh, it's so good. So it's like, it's not as sour as I thought it was going to be. There's like a lemon tartness when you first sip into it. And then you immediately get like sweet cherry pie. But when I say sweet, I mean like relative to the other flavors in the beer. This is not like last week when I was drinking maple syrup. It's not like artificially sweet in any way. It's like pure cherry sweetness, like the essence of the cherry. It's so good. And then you get like cinnamon, a little bit of the oak, and then I swear there's like a second wave of cherry, like a dark cherry that comes after, and then that has like an incredibly long, sweet, but not like sickeningly sweet, a super like impossibly long cherry finish, and it's kind of dry. It's spectacular.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Two big thumbs up. I had a feeling I was really gonna like it, but I think it met and or exceeded my expectations.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. I have a bottle I can't wait to open and try it.
Okay, yeah. Now you can be excited for when you drink yours.
Well, my birthday's the next week, so maybe next week on the podcast I'll drink it.
There you go. This is the official birthday beer.
All right, so mine's really good. Probably not quite as complex as Jason's beer. It's really simple, nice, crushable lager. A lot of what I smelled in the nose, I was tasting a lot of like sort of lemony grass, a little bit of like herbal spiciness from the hops. Finish is really crisp. It actually finishes like, I was like, it took me forever to finally place the taste, like mineral water, like, sparkling water.
Interesting.
Yeah. Kind of that just like sort of carbonated water, like bitterness, I never really liked it. I think it's very popular now, the sparkling water thing. But I just always think of like, the syrup runs out on the fountain soda and you think you're getting Sprite, but you just...
It's exactly what it tastes like.
It's just carbonated water with no flavoring. Yeah, that's how it kind of finishes.
Interesting.
But yeah. So let me add a few things. First off, Bierstadt Lager, which is the collaboration brewery with Fair State Cooperative. They are based in Denver. Apparently they are very, very popular there for the lagers that they make. They call this a bitty little 10-degree Plato Czech style lager. So I needed to know a little bit more about what that meant. So the 10 degrees Plato refers to the gravity of the wort. And for each degree of, and how much sugar you have per like 100 grams of. So 1 degree Plato is 10 grams of sugar per 100 grams of wort or something like that. So anyway, it kind of gives you an idea of how, like, what your alcohol volume is going to be at the end. So usually for every 1 degree Plato, you get 0.4% alcohol. So that's why this is a 10 degree Plato Czech style lager. ABV comes out to about 4%.
Cool.
So anyway, just some fun facts. Now the other thing I have to talk to you about today. So tonight, actually, I went to Pint House Pizza for dinner with one goal in mind, because I was there last week and they had a Czech style Pilsner on tap, and they had it 2 ways. One was just a regular pour, and the second way was they called it a slow pour.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't know what that is. So I was asking the guy, and he's like, yeah, so basically it takes about 10 minutes to pour the beer. You pour right down the middle of the glass. So what you get is basically a glass almost exclusively full of foam. And then you stop and you wait a little bit. That foam will die down, and then you do the same thing. And you do that over and over and over again until you have, a lot more beer than foam. But what you end up with is this like crazy like meringue looking foam at the top. Like, it's so thick. And then you get the beer warms up a little bit,
right? So
you get a few more flavors coming out, and it just opens it up a little bit more. The malts come out. Actually, the color changes. So tonight I went there with the specific goal of going and getting this slow pour Pilsner. So I ordered my food and my beer, and then I went and sat down. He was like, yeah, I'll find you and bring it out to you when it's finally done. He brought it to me, and then he also brought me just a small little taster of the regular pour, so that I could drink them side by side. Yeah. And the color was actually different.
Jeez.
The color on the slow pour was a little bit darker, a little bit more orange. And it was interesting. The flavor difference was interesting. Like, the regular pour was very, very much like what you think of as a very light, easy drinking Pilsner. Very, very crisp. Not a lot of flavors almost at all really coming out. Contrast that to the slow pour one, which again was darker in color, a little bit more malt forward, a little bit more spice forward. I just think the flavors kind of opened up a little bit more. It was interesting. Both of them went amazingly well with the pizza, and that's one of the things I think, when we mentioned about these pale lagers, they're such a great food beer.
Yeah.
Because they can cut through any flavor, they can cut through any spiciness, so they're just a great beer to pair with food. But anyway, both pours were great with my pizza. But it was just interesting to learn about the slow pour. And so, of course, I was Googling it a bunch.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this like a thing that... Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never heard of this before.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of articles basically saying, like, you're pouring your Pilsner all wrong. And you should be patient and take your time and pour it out slowly.
Slow pour.
Yeah.
Huh. This is really interesting. So So Pint House Pizza just does this now, or is it just for that specific beer? Or?
Just for that Czech Pilsner. Yeah. Okay. They'll always have it. But
I wonder if anyone else around me does this slow pour. I want to try it.
Do it yourself.
I guess I could. Yeah.
But anyway, apparently the name of this beer, Side Pole, is actually named after a certain kind of tap that they use to pour the Pilsner, to serve the Pilsner. And it creates like that more of that open flavor in the like more meringue, fuller head. So.
Super cool. Yeah, I just wonder if you could I don't know if you could do it with like a can. I feel like the beer would go flat before I feel like that's part of the advantage you have like on tap.
Like you have the carbonation coming.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, that's probably true.
All right, cool. So thumbs up on yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really good. I like that it's just one of those clean, refreshing beers. It's going to be the theme of this episode. But what's funny is that, this is the most popular beer in the world. And when they started to become brewed, they completely took over.
Yeah.
So, something about it.
All right,
Easy to
very
drink.
cool. More on that to come. All right, so next we have our postscript and beer news segment. I have a postscript, and then also Steven is canceling the beer news part of the segment for his own Steven Tells a Story segment.
I believe we agreed with story time with Steve.
Oh, I'm sorry. Story Time with Steve is the new segment. And this is a very experimental segment. If it goes well, we may continue. If it goes poorly, it will not continue. I will do my postscript first.
I try not to make it bedtime stories.
Oh gosh, he's gonna put us all to sleep. So I have another thing I'm gonna taste today that was also delivered to me, and I'm very excited about.
Beer number 2.
Yes, beer number 2. So I was promised the terroir of Austin. So I was given Jester King, and I was also given Big Red, which
Big
was
Red. True taste of Texas terroir right here.
So I have never tried this soda. I'm a huge soda fiend, and so I am going to be tasting this as our postscript. And pouring it out, I brought a glass, giving you guys the full tasting notes.
Well, it's funny, as we mentioned how cream soda in Canada is pink, whatever.
Yes.
And the more I read about it, they were saying they actually has it tastes a little bit like Big Red.
Okay.
So
it poured red. Even the head was like pink. So there's a sickening amount of food coloring in this product. It smells like, oh no, Steven, I don't like this smell. So it definitely smells like strawberry and cotton candy. But to the refined palate, such as myself, there is the slightest hint of toothpaste. Not like fresh toothpaste. But you know how like your toothbrush tastes if it still has a little residual toothpaste on it? Mm-hmm. It smells like that. All right.
Oddly specific.
That's what it smells like. Hey, can't help it. That's what the brain puts out. Okay. It tastes exactly what it smells like. Definitely, yeah, it's a little bit of cream soda, a little bit of cotton candy, a little bit of residual toothpaste.
It's very sweet.
It's powerfully sweet. The aftertaste is reminiscent of Code Red Mountain Dew. So, on the one hand, this is disgusting.
And on the other?
On the other hand, I would totally drink this. I'm going to tighten the cap back on to preserve this for later.
Oh my gosh.
Thumbs up to Big Red.
All right, it's a winner, huh?
Yeah.
I have one daughter, and one of my daughters really, really likes it, and then the rest of the family just thinks it's terrible. So
it's a lot.
It's very sweet.
All right, cool. So that was my postscript. I've now been indoctrinated into the Big Red family.
Welcome.
Thanks. I really feel like I experienced some Texas today. All right, story time with Steve. Is that what we're calling it?
Story time with Steve.
I'm ready.
Okay, get comfortable.
I have to drink a bunch of water.
Get your blanket on.
I need to cleanse my palate before... I don't want to waste a drop of this Jester King after drinking Big Red.
Well, you can use story time with Steve time to cleanse your palate.
Okay, will do.
So, my wife and I were going out on a date, and we went to this place called Cork, and it's a wine bar because my wife likes wine, and I always make her go to breweries, so we finally went to a wine bar for her. I figured I could find something. We got a really nice charcuterie board and some dips. They were very good. My wife got wine, and then I noticed that they had Wild Mind Ale's smoothie sours. So you remember the one you had that was like super, 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 super sour, right?
Yeah.
So it was like a blackberry one they had. I was going to order that. Well, then I see the bartender. She is pouring one into a glass, and she fills like the glass half with the beer, and then she takes Prosecco and fills the rest. So she like combined Prosecco with the smoothie sour. And so when she got over to us, we were like, what were you doing mixing those two? And she's like, oh yeah, they had a name for it. I can't remember. Anyway, they had a name for it. And she was like, yeah, these beers are really, really sour. And so people will like the mix with the Prosecco. It kind of cuts down on the sourness, makes it more tolerable. And so my wife was like, do you want that? And I said, I want the whole beer, no Prosecco.
Heck yeah, brother. Don't water down that.
The lady's like, okay. And it was so sour and it was so good.
Aren't those sour?
Yeah, very, very, very sour. Those Wild Mind ales are something else.
That's cool though. That's actually so fascinating. They're making like spritzes out of them.
Because
that's like that's a popular thing is you take Prosecco and then you mix it with Aperol or like they're like those, I guess, are they an aperitif? I don't know what you consider them, but they're really bitter, like digestive drinks in Italy. But I guess some people probably drink them straight, but if you mix them like with Prosecco, it's way better because then you can have like a bittersweet cocktail basically. So they're basically doing that with beer because the beer's so sour. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, Paradox. I think that's what they called it. Was the the name of if you wanted to order that. So I just thought that was really funny because I'm probably one of the few people that I just want the beer. I don't want the really, really sour.
Oh, I'm so proud of you for being a purist.
Don't mix anything in my gimmicky smoothie sour, okay?
Yeah, you're like, I want it to be so sour that I feel like I'm gonna die.
So there you go. That was story time with Steve.
I loved it. It was exciting.
Sometimes I just have like beer experiences. Well, kind of like my experience tonight with the slow pour.
Yeah.
I learn new things about beer, or I have funny experiences with beer. So turn that into story time with Steve.
All right, it can remain as a segment.
Well, sometimes, we do have a beer news, remember? And you didn't like it. That's why we had to replace it with story time with Steve. But we do have beer news. It's National IPA Day today.
Oh, yeah, I'm over it.
You, got about it and over it in, half a second.
Yeah, well, we decoded the fact that there's, 5,000 days. So every day is, 20 days.
Yeah.
It cheapens them to me.
Well, it's funny because, I literally had the thought when I saw it. I was like, wasn't it just IPA Day, 10 days ago?
Wait, is there 2 IPA days?
No, it was probably, National Beer Day or...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's just
Drink
too many.
a Beer Day or National What's Your Favorite Beer Day or something.
Yeah, it's not special.
Got that confused with National IPA Day.
So, yeah, drink an IPA.
I wonder if there's a National Double IPA Day.
Oh, no. Okay, we'll postscript that.
Maybe that fits into the category of all IPAs. You can drink a double IPA if you want. What's your favorite IPA? Let's just do a thing. Since it's National IPA.
In honor of IPA Day?
Yeah.
Pliny the Elder. Does it double? Does that count?
Of course it counts.
Well, it only counts...
Under the umbrella of IPAs.
Well, wait. We'll figure it out because I'm going to do a postscript to figure out if there's a double IPA day. And if there's a double IPA day, you can't pick a double IPA for IPA day. Okay.
Well, you have a week to do the postscript and come up with a regular IPA if necessary.
Okay, all right, I put it down in the postscripts. What's yours?
My favorite IPA? Juicy Bits, Old Works Brewing, Greeley, Colorado.
All right.
Mine's probably a tie between Juicy Bits and Ghost in the Machine.
Ooh. You have to pick one.
Okay, Juicy Bits, sorry.
But Ghost in the Machine is a close second?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you have it.
I might pick Ghost. I want to try those two side by side.
That'd be a good side by side.
An excellent side by side. Yeah, good luck getting those two beers together fresh. So. All right, anyways. Enough dilly-dallying.
All right, let's get into it.
We got to get into the main topic because it's
I'm stalling because I'm scared.
Of what?
I'm just nervous about this topic. I feel like somebody who knows a lot more about lagers and pilsners is just going to destroy us in the ratings.
1 star, didn't know enough about pilsners and lagers.
What probably happened is they hadn't listened to any of our other deep dives where we realized we didn't know anything about anything else either.
Right. Oh, and I need to preface this deep dive. We need to make sure we hit the 5 topics of a deep dive. Do you remember what they are?
I know that prohibition is one.
Yes.
And a style being saved.
Yes,
is that one of them? A
style is carried or revived by a single person.
Okay. Fire.
Fire, yes. There's 2 more.
Tax evasion.
Tax evasion, yes. And last but not least, happens all the time. It's very bad.
I don't remember.
There's 2 really big ones.
War.
So, yes, we got to make sure we hit. Every time we do a deep dive, all 5 of those things always come up. So keep that in mind.
All right. Well, I think first we need to define what we're talking about.
Yes.
So there are 2 main categories of beer. One is ales and one is lagers. Ales are fermented with a yeast that prefer warm temperatures, and they usually do not need a very long fermentation time, 5 to 10 days. Now, lagers are the other style. The word lager really just means to store or to condition for a long time. So it's kind of like there are, of course, exceptions to every rule. And there are exceptions to the ale and lager thing where you use a lager yeast, like a cold IPA, you use a lager yeast, or, there's types of beers where you use an ale yeast, but you ferment at a colder temperature, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, without the few exceptions, the lagers use a yeast that prefers a cold temperature during fermentation. And these beers are generally fermented for a very long time, usually weeks to months. What was happening really was in like the 13th century. That's kind of like when people started to realize that yeast was making the beer. They didn't really actually know that what they were working with exactly. They just knew that if they took the yeast cap from one fermentation and they used it on the next one, not only they made like similar beer, that's how they made the beer, and they just knew that like that's how it worked, is that whatever was in that yeast cap was making the beer. That's all they really understood.
Yeah, it's the way we've always done it, right? Yeah.
And basically, they were, by using these yeast over and over and over and over and over again in beers, they were cultivating a brewer's yeast, a strain of yeast that was perfect for brewing. What they noticed, and of course, like you're talking about a time when you don't have any sort of refrigeration, so yeast that ferment at like basically just kind of room or a little bit warmer than room temperature were ideal because you didn't have the ability to cool and ferment at a lower temperature. But they did notice that every once in a while they would come across these yeast strains that would kind of fall out of suspension and they would only be active at a lower temperature. They started kind of cultivating those yeast and using them in beers. This is now like we're talking about like mid 15th century. Started to use that yeast to brew a beer at a colder temperature. And what they realized is that you needed a much longer period of fermentation and conditioning because one, the yeast are just the bottom feeding cold fermenting yeast are less active and less flamboyant. They're less flavorful. They just don't produce a lot of phenols or esters. They just turn sugar into alcohol like that. That's kind of what they do. They don't produce a whole lot of extra stuff. And you get this kind of like harsh beer at first, but the length and the time of fermentation starts to really, really round out those edges and it cleans itself up. And like haze falls out of suspension. These beers are very, very clear. And so that's kind of where your split came between the two types of beers. And they became super popular. But what was interesting is that for a very, very long time, these were basically only made in a very, very small geographical area of Germany, basically where it was a little bit cooler. And there were a lot of like caves and underground areas where they would store the beer at a cooler temperature because again you're talking time when there's no sort of refrigeration. So because of the difficulty in cold fermenting, they just weren't made.
Gotcha. Because you needed like natural refrigeration, and a lot of people just didn't have access to that.
Yeah. So I mean really at this point you kind of like fast forward to the mid 1800s when they start having, not only do they start to understand yeast. This is, Louis Pasteur making the discovery that yeast is, these single cell organisms are what ferment the beer. And so there's like more understanding of yeast strains. There's more access to refrigeration. These beers start to become
brew at a higher rate, and they become very, very, very popular. And so what I should mention now is that there are these like kind of two main branches off of the lager umbrella of beers. One would be pale lagers, and the other are dark lagers. So we're just going to talk about the pale lager branch of this tree. The dark lagers would be like your Dunkels and your Schwartz beers and much, much more maltier style. So we're going to mainly focus on the pale lagers. The three sort of main branches of that umbrella would be Pilsners, Hell's Lager, and Dortmund Exports. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of those.
Nice. You really set the stage.
I try. But I think what's interesting is that I don't know, 150, 200 years ago, we basically had a craft brew scene of almost all ales.
Yeah.
And almost no lagers. And that basically completely flipped.
Yeah, 180. Well, totally.
Yeah. So like I was mentioning, these beers became very, very popular. People wanted to drink these. And even to the dismay of like ale brewers did not want to stop brewing ales. One of the sort of interesting things about these lagers is that they're hard to make. It's the most difficult style to brew. Between the time, the temperature control, and the more difficult yeast to work with, and then the fact that you have a beer that is very, very malt and hop forward. Like the yeast, you don't get any help from the yeast in terms of covering up off flavors, and so you just have to be very, very precise, and you have to be able to express the flavors of your ingredients without screwing it up. Like the balance is so critical because you just can't hide behind anything.
Yeah, you talked about that a little bit was it Kings of Craft Beers or Kings of something?
Yeah, the documentary about Budweiser, their internal competition.
Yeah, and they were kind of saying exactly what you're saying. Like they think it's actually one of the hardest beers to make because there's nowhere to hide. Like it has to be perfect.
Just a tad bit too estery, a tad bit too spicy, anything, it just throws the balance off, and it's very, very easy to detect. Any diacetyl, any off flavor that can happen in beer, it's going to be so easy to pick up in a lager. So.
Very interesting. All right, so
you can see how ale brewers were like, we don't want to do that.
Right, it's like something that's way harder.
We were like, we want to drink that, and they're like, we don't want to make that.
Yeah, they're like, hey, that thing used to make? Well, now it takes longer, and it's much easier to mess up.
But so there were the three I mentioned, the Pilsner, that basically came out of Czechoslovakia. Hell's Lager is the German style of Hell's, and Dortmund are both German styles of the pale lager.
Yes. Well, and in Bohemia, we could start with the Pils because it's kind of a cool story, but there was these brewing guilds, and Europe gets devastated by the 30 Years' War. There's one count of war for your deep dive.
Nice.
And then over time in Bohemia, kind of the beer is like the quality is going way down, and it's getting infected. It's like it's all going bad. It's getting like bacterial infections, and there's this moment where all these people gather in front of the town hall I'm going to forget the town's name, but it's and they pour out all this beer in an act of protest. It's like the
Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, it's the Boston Tea Party equivalent of the for beer, where they're like, we're not going to drink this. And so it's kind of crazy. Like the town rallies and they build a new brewery, they're like, we're gonna make good beer, and then they seek out an expert.
This is back when politics was fun.
Yeah, could you imagine if
we gotta get a brewery built?
Our beer stinks, we want a brewery. And they hired this guy named Josh Crowell, who was like an expert brewer, and they're like, come run this brewery. Apparently, by
Josh?
the way, is it Josh?
It doesn't sound like a very
I wrote down Josh Crowell, but maybe...
No, you're probably right. You're
kind of right, though. Doesn't it sound right?
It sounds like a weird name, right?
The last name sounds right.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna look this up.
Apparently, this guy was
Joseph.
Joseph. Josh. I was typing too fast. Okay, good catch there. Josh. His name is...
That's not... It's like Billy Bob Grohl.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this 19th century Germany? His name is Billy Bob. What?
Oh my god. Have fun editing this.
Okay. Josef Groll.
Josef Groll. There you go. Apparently this guy was a huge I don't know. He was not a nice person.
No, he was like the meanest person in Germany was his nickname.
So I think he only
What if
runs
that's your nickname?
Yeah. I think
you're like the meanest dude in this whole country.
in a country. Yeah. So I think he only runs the brewery for like 3 years, but apparently they smuggled in a strain of yeast from a rogue monk.
That is not true.
That's what I read.
That's not true. This is debunked in the Beer Bible.
Oh, my research was... It sounds so cool.
Falling for romantic stories again, are you?
I always fall for the romantic stories.
Yeah, so there were a lot of like old tales and myths that Grohl was
about Josh.
Josh smuggled the yeast strain out of the old brewery and moved it to the new one, or there was like a rogue monk that they got to steal the yeast.
Yeah, that's what I read, and he smuggled it out for them.
The truth is that even in like Bohemia, where this was like they're trying to get this new brewery started, like lagering was still already being done there. So most likely they just bought the yeast strain. They didn't have to smuggle it out anywhere. It was not a Bavarian secret.
That's less exciting.
Yeah. There's actually another myth about Grohl being like the malt that they used was delivered to them on accident, not like, and that's how they got the initial malt to start making the beer.
Oh, crazy.
Just a stupid myth.
Another romantic story.
Yeah, because Grohl was probably the maltster, so it wasn't like delivered to him. He did it himself.
They just made it themselves.
Yeah.
And this is like light roasted malts are being used now, where they're not toasting them as much. I guess the ability to malt got a little bit more nuanced, where they're just not like burning the crap out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of like came out of England.
Okay.
They were using paler malts already in England, and so that kind of flowed out in Germany. The other interesting thing is these beers are mashed using a method called decoction. And I would love to explain it to you, but I don't know.
You don't know what it entails? Or it's...
No, so basically what's happening is that they're taking out, like they take grain out of the mash tun, they boil it, and then they put it back in. It's something to do with like manipulating the temperature.
Okay.
And then resting it. So they use for a long time, like the original Pilsner brewery, they still use a triple decoction mash, which is like the most like basically becomes a 4-step mash, because you have your initial mash and then 3 additional. And they're like really the only ones that still do that. Some of like the original light lager brewers still do some sort of decoction mash, but usually it's a double decoction. In fact, I think the side pull, they used a decoction mash for this.
Nice.
Yeah.
Authentic.
Very authentic.
Okay, so they have Josh, they have the brewery, and they have medieval tunnels. So apparently there's tunnels all over the place. And so they have their natural refrigeration. I guess they dug more tunnels for the new brewery as well. But
they just kept expanding the underground space.
Like as it got more and more popular, they're like, we need more tunnels. So
it's so great. I mean, they like beer like ran their lives.
Yes, because the demand just ramped up.
Just like whatever they needed to do to get beer and the beer that people wanted brewed, they did. I like the resourcefulness of these people.
You like the way they think, their motivations.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's Pilsner, and it gets incredibly popular. Do you have anything else to add for Pilsner?
So the interesting thing that I learned is that actually then like there's not a lot, like in Czechoslovakia, if you say Pilsner, you really are only referring to the beer made at the original Urquell brewery. So it's just Urquell Pilsner, and then all these other beers are really just called light lagers. That's the name for them that translates. There's all these different kinds, and I can't pronounce any of the words, but basically there's versions. A lot of it has to do with how strong they are. So there's like lighter, more like 2 to 3% alcohol beers. You have ones that are getting up more like to 5 and 6. Those are called special. You have light and dark versions. So there's all these like Czechoslovakian lagers that like fall into the category of light lager. Not all of these do, but some of them that really are kind of put under a category of pilsners now. But
okay.
But really,
it's like a little bit like champagne or something like that. Like everywhere else, it's sparkling wine or
exactly.
You can't,
or any of those like geographically locked.
That's a good way to say it. Geographically locked.
Yeah.
And then the way all the American brewers get around it is they just say that, and then they say in style.
Yeah. Trappist style.
This is a Pilsner style.
So I guess the other one to mention, because we can move on to Hell's.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like it kind of got popular and then spread to Germany, but
yeah, it kind of moved over the border as it became popular. And it's kind of funny because in Germany they had their lagers, but they were Dunkels. So they were much more used to drinking darker lagers.
Right.
And so as these lighter lagers started to appear, they called them Hell's lagers because Hell's translates to light or pale or bright. So that's why they called them Hell's lagers.
Just to differentiate them by the color.
Mm-hmm. Huh. And these new pale, bright lagers kind of created a scandal because they were so used to drinking their Dunkels and darker lagers that they were like committed to blackballing Hell's lagers and getting breweries to stop making them. And a lot of Munich area breweries boycotted the new style. But they, like, as a testament to how popular these beers were, despite like all this opposition to them, they still like eventually sort of just won out. Like it just became the beer style that people preferred.
The popularity was undeniable. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of is a testament to how good these beers can be and how much people love them, because even like purists and people are like, no, that's not good. They're like forming coalitions to get them banned, and breweries were refusing to make that style. And it's like hard seltzer, all the breweries that for a long time said they were never going to make them, and then they just made them anyway. Because you have to give the people what they want.
I was going to say, sometimes you have to give in to what the people want, Steven, even if we know it's bad.
And again, like once you had refrigeration and you could make these lagers any time of year, they became super popular. They spread north. Most notably, they spread north to an area called Dortmund. And this was like a big mining, coal and steel area. And in 1887, they brewed their first pale lager in Dortmund, Dortmunder Union Brewing. And they made it at 2 strengths. And one of them was called Export, the stronger version. And that became like the most popular beer, especially among the coal workers. They liked the stronger beer. And again, this is like 5.5%. That's the strong beer.
Oh, those sweet summer childs.
Oh, yes. And the really distinct thing about the Dortmund Export is that it's a little bit sweeter. So it's like a little sweeter, a little maltier, and then a higher alcohol than the Hell's or the Pilsner. That's kind of your defining characteristic of the Dortmund Export.
Okay, interesting. And then I was reading the part of what they were talking about, the Hell's. Germany has harder water than in Bohemia. So like that slightly changes the way like the hops became slightly more pronounced because the water was harder. So it's kind of cool. It's like the influence of the style is spreading, but then you get it kind of always happens this way. You get like local variation based on the terroir and like local preference and like just whatever happened to happen locally. So that's kind of cool.
Cool. Yeah, so that really kind of dominated the German brewing scene. And then you get to like the World Wars and through like the 1960s, and like the Helles-Lager are popular, but it's really this Dortmund export that is really the most dominating beer in that in that light lager market. So the Pilsner was like the least favorite of those three.
That's funny.
And then I think just like I think that maybe this is where we talk about World War and Prohibition and what came out of that, because we did a deep dive on Yingling. Yingling's lager is a much more of an amber lager, so kind of a sweeter lager, a little bit estery. Probably, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with the Dortmund export beers and the Helles lagers, but I think it definitely sort of fits into that category, and it was a very, very, very good and beer that dominated the market. But you see that transition through Prohibition, where a lot of those brewers just didn't survive, and what survived on the back end, what came out of that was this sort of very homogenized light beer product in the United States.
I want to jump back a little bit though. So the initial spread from Europe to North America was like German immigrants. Okay. And when they started to try to make beer in America, they realized we don't have 2-row barley, we have 6-row barley. So it doesn't make a clear. Part of what like makes the light lager appealing is like it's the color and the clarity. Like I think Pilsner and light lager has also sort of made clear glasses more popular because it's actually like nice to look at the crystal clear beer. So anyways, the 6-row barley has like way more protein and wouldn't produce clear beer. So what they started figuring out is like, we can supplement some of the barley and then use corn instead, because then you get the clarity of the beer. And then some people, especially Budweiser, used rice. And they still do that today. So that's kind of interesting. I always thought they used rice because it was like a cost-saving measure. And corn, too, especially in the U.S., is highly subsidized. But I don't think that's actually true. I think it's like kind of what we talked about before is like they wanted to make it here, but there was like local challenges in the 6-row barley. And they solved it by using corn, and then they got the product they wanted. But then it kind of shapes the future of the product in America forever, because like that's just how they solved the problem here. And now Budweiser still puts rice in the brew. So then we get into Prohibition. I have another side story. So I also wanted to cover how it spread to Mexico, because Mexico had long been fermenting corn or agave. They had a drink called Tesquino. I think that's what it's called, which still gets made today, but not like on a commercial scale. Apparently it's only made like with family recipes. So the Spanish, when they started to come and conquer over here, they brought barley to make beer. So that was kind of like the first introduction of beer into Mexico and like Central and South America. But they didn't really start making it until apparently the first Mexican brewery was in 1543. Alfonso de Herrera started making European-influenced beer. And now here's your tax evasion pillar of the deep dive. So he was making it, and it was very popular with Europeans that were there that wanted to drink, European-style beer. But then the Spanish got really mad that they were like making it locally because they weren't buying the imported beer from Europe. So they put like tons of taxes on the locally produced beer, and they basically cut all the import taxes on the imported beer, and it basically destroyed the local production of beer. So unfortunately, it didn't make it very well. But then Prohibition would happen in the United States, and around the same time, a little bit before Prohibition, you had like Dos Equis, Victoria, Bohemia, which is a brand in the 1900s, which is Awesome. It's kind of cool. They named it Bohemia kind of after its origins. And then Carta Blanca, we're starting to produce beer like in Mexico. And then during Prohibition, the Mexican beer market got like a huge boost because apparently people would just drive to Mexico to drink beer because you couldn't get it in America. So kind of cool.
Awesome.
Like, yeah, so Prohibition kind of like really damaged the American beer scene, but it kind of helped out the Mexican beer scene, which is really cool.
I like that. Like with the craft beer landscape now, it is kind of interesting to see a little bit of a course reversal because what's so fascinating is that ales made a return, right? Like, so lagers became the most dominant style in the world, and then especially in the United States. And then the U.S. craft beer revolution, like, was going back to ales. It's this weird sort of cycle.
It is.
Where ales were made for so long and the preferred style, and then you had this revolution of pilsners and of lagers, a whole other sort of category of beer style took over and dominated. And then now, like, we're trying to get back to ales, but it's fascinating to me, I guess, because one of the reasons why the ales kind of died out was because there was a preference to drinking these lagers, and it's just interesting now that like we want to get back to drinking ales. I mean, we do, but now, and I feel like there's even, well, maybe it's been happening for a while now, but you have craft breweries doing some of these light lager styles, but doing them in their craft beer style. So yeah, more back to the roots of how these beers were originally made, which I guess that seems sort of more full circle to me. Of like,
yeah, like they're going all the way back to how they were made traditionally, kind of like with your decoction. What are they called?
Decoction, yeah.
Yeah.
Decoction. Yeah, it's like, I guess in some ways the reputation of the lager, reputation of the Czech Pilsner got tarnished by American beer.
Right.
American macro beer, right? And so I guess in some ways, like, we have to thank them for creating such bad beer. And then that created this revolution of we want to drink flavorful ales, and then that led more towards people just wanting to brew beer in more traditional methods,
right?
Including not only ales but also including lagers, and brewing those more in traditional methods and making good versions of that kind of beer, whereas for so long it just had this reputation of being just crappy and thin and not flavorful. So
yeah, totally.
So now we have everything.
Yeah, now
ales,
we have
lagers, and we have like the technology and ability to just sort of brew any type of beer at any time.
Right, and you can do we have refrigeration, and we can modify the water to make it any way we want.
Yeah, manipulate the water, manipulate the temperature. You can hold temperatures exactly within, probably tenths of a degree. It's just kind of fascinating. But look, I lose faith in humanity, but we have, essentially created a environment where you can make any type of beer at any time, and
that's good.
That's great for human achievement. I feel some connection to those people in Bohemia.
I don't remember the town, but yeah,
where there was just like they demanded like we need
demanding a new brewery, and
they built it. They made it all state of the art and everything.
Yeah, they took it
It's
seriously.
a very, very fancy brewery, and because the people demanded that they have that. I love that.
Let's go try it in our modern era.
We need to gather in town square.
Demand breweries
for beer
purposes. Well, you already have tons of breweries.
Yeah. We're like,
Oh yeah. Oops.
There's like one right there, one around the block.
Yeah, breweries have gotten to the point where like,
what do we want? Breweries. Yeah. When do we want them? Right now. Okay. Walk around the corner, man.
It's like the Starbucks across the street from the Starbucks at this point. Yeah.
Like meet at the Starbucks on the corner.
Like which corner?
It's an A. The north corner or the south corner?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well,
All right.
I don't know. Was that a deep dive or just we just waded in the water of pale lagers? It's a long history.
Yeah.
It's a long history. It's a complicated history, which is funny because it's not really that complicated of a beer. In the grand scheme of things, it's really just not. It's just hard to brew. It takes time. It's a difficult style to perfect and make good, but it's not. But the whole point is to be very, very drinkable, very light-bodied, and just like sort of a crisp, refreshing beer. And I mentioned this earlier, but it really is probably the easiest beer to pair with food because there's not really anything it doesn't go with.
True.
I think that's another reason why they're so popular.
That makes sense.
I mean, if I had to pick a beer to drink with dinner, this one I'm drinking right now would win over any sort of IPA, certainly any sour that I could pick because it's so hard to pair those beers with food.
Yeah.
And do it well.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's refreshing, it's light, and it just isn't really going to get in the way of any other flavor that you're eating.
And you see that a lot, like in the Cicerone Instagram, they'll post a quiz or something about like what kind of beer would you pair with this food or whatever. And it's interesting to see some of the results, and then they kind of show you the results of what like the master cicerones say. And it really is like it's usually simple styles that end up winning, or styles like, I don't know, like Dunkel, sort of these sort of like maltier styles or cleaner styles. Rarely are you ever going to see like, oh yeah, pair this with a hazy IPA, you know? Like,
yeah.
Those beers tend to be more enjoy on their own. Beers.
Stand alone.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, do you think we did justice to it, or as close as we could? We can always hit a deep dive too.
Yeah. Well, we could do part 2 and do the dark lagers, and kind of go back over anything that we missed on the pale lagers. But I think sort of the main points really too is that you have this second branch, and you have these 2 major branches of beer, and I just love that like cycle of what is popular and what people like. And now I guess it's like peak humanity now, where we just can make whatever we want at any time. But it's really fun, and that's why we have a podcast about it.
Because there's so much good beer to drink.
Think about trying to make a podcast in Bohemia at the time when the only beer available is a Hell's. That's it.
Just talk about it every week.
Like this week, Josh and Billy Bob.
Good German
talking
names.
About the Hells. Hans and Franz.
There you go. All right. Enough fun.
They're off the rails.
Off the rails. All right. Well, if you want to reach out to us, we are available on Instagram at attenuation.podcast. And also we have an email at contact.attenuation@gmail.com. And this has been episode 71 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by my best friend since 8th grade, Stephen.
That's me.
And we are saying cheers, and we will see you next week for episode 72.
Cheers. Happy birthday, buddy.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram or Facebook for more fun content. Catch you next week. Cheers!